You know the drill. You finish a rideshare, you buy something online, you even use a public restroom, and then, boom, there's that question. How would you rate your experience? 5 stars, 1 star? It feels so simple, right? But behind that little question is a massive field of science dedicated to figuring out one thing.
Right. That's the big question. How do you take a feeling, something like satisfaction or trust, or even how good a sandwich tastes, and turn it into a number that a company can actually use to make decisions? This is the central puzzle for market researchers, product designers, and, well, pretty much everyone these days.
And this isn't just an abstract problem. I mean, take the New York City subway. If they want to get more people to ride, they can't just guess what's wrong. They need cold, hard data. They have to find a way to measure how riders feel about things like safety or how clean the cars are. They've got to turn all those feelings into numbers they can actually track and hopefully improve. And that, right there, is where rating scales come into play.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about why we even need these scales. Then we'll get into the 2 main types. After that, we'll meet the most common rating scales, the ones you see every day. We'll also touch on what it takes to design a good one. And finally, we'll ask the big question. How do you know if a scale is any good in the first place?
Well, at its heart, the challenge is that attitudes are invisible. They're complicated, so to really understand them, we need a consistent tool to measure them. These tools are what researchers call scaling techniques, and they're designed to give us a little window into what people are actually thinking and feeling.
Now, for this explainer, we're going to zero in on what are called non-comparative scales. I know, that sounds super technical, but the idea is actually really simple. It just means we're not asking you to compare, say, Coke versus Pepsi. We're just asking, hey, how do you feel about Coke? You're just looking at one thing all by itself.
Okay, so within that big category, things pretty much split into 2 main families. You can think of them as 2 totally different ways to answer that question about how you feel about something.
On one side, you've got the continuous rating scale. Picture a slider on a website, you know. It's a line that goes from probably the worst all the way to probably the best. You can put your mark literally anywhere you want on that line. And then you've got the itemized rating scale, which honestly is way more common. This is your classic 5-star review. You're given specific boxes or categories, and you have to pick one.
All right, let's really dig into those itemized scales, because this is where it gets interesting. Researchers have a whole toolbox of different designs, and each one is built for a specific job. We're going to look at the 3 big ones.
First up, the one you've definitely seen a million times, the Likert scale. It's named after the guy who invented it, and its whole deal is that it measures how much you agree or disagree with a statement.
And you know, this is really clever. Notice it's not asking a blunt question like, is Sears a good store? No. Instead, it gives you these very specific statements, like Sears sells high-quality merchandise, and then asks you to rate how much you agree, from strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. This lets researchers get at all the different little parts of a customer's attitude.
So what's the big advantage here? It's super easy. It's easy for researchers to make, and it's easy for us to understand. The downside? Well, if you have to rate like 20 of these statements in a row, it can start to feel like a bit of a slog. Okay, next tool out of the box is the semantic differential scale. The key to this one is that it always uses pairs of opposite words. Think powerful versus weak, or modern versus old-fashioned.
And this example just nails it. You're not agreeing with a sentence anymore. You're placing Sears somewhere on a spectrum between 2 extremes. Is it more powerful or is it more weak? Is it more modern or more old-fashioned? When you do this for a bunch of different word pairs, a researcher can build this really detailed personality profile of a brand. It's pretty cool.
Its biggest strength is just how versatile it is for getting that brand image. Now, the main drawback is a little nerdy, but it's important. Researchers argue about whether the gaps between the points are really equal in your mind. I mean, is the jump from somewhat weak to weak the same size as the jump from weak to very weak? Maybe not. And if they're not equal, it can mess with the math a little bit.
And our third tool is the staple scale. This one is a little different. See, unlike the last one with its 2 opposite words, this scale is unipolar, which just means it measures one idea at a time. It uses a number scale, usually from -5 to +5. But look closely. There's no 0. There's no neutral middle ground.
So here's how you'd use it. You're given a single phrase, like high quality, and then you pick a number. A positive number means, yep, that phrase describes it well. A negative number means, nope, that's not accurate at all. And the further you get from the middle, the stronger you feel about it. The big win for this one is that it's super easy to do over the phone, since it's all just numbers. But its big weakness is that, Well, it can be really confusing for people. The format just isn't as intuitive as the other ones we've looked at.
All right, so we've met the big players, but here's the thing. Building a good scale is so much more than just picking a format. The little details matter a lot.
A researcher has to make a ton of choices. For example, should there be an odd or an even number of categories? Think about it. An odd number, like 1 to 5, gives people a safe, neutral middle option. But an even number, like a 4-star system, that forces you to lean one way or the other. It's a really powerful little trick to find out what someone's true feelings are when they might otherwise just play it safe.
Okay, now check this out. On the left, you've got a balanced scale. See, an equal number of good and bad options. But the scale on the right is unbalanced. It's got way more good choices than bad ones. So why would you ever do that? Well, if you already know that most of your customers are pretty happy, an unbalanced scale like this can give you a much more detailed picture of just how happy they are.
And hey, it's not always about boring circles and checkboxes. Designers can get really creative to make these things more intuitive and, let's be honest, more fun to fill out. You might see a thermometer to show how warm you feel about a product, or a row of smiley faces, which works great for measuring emotion, especially with kids. And this brings us to maybe the most crucial question of all. You've picked a scale, you've designed it carefully, but how do you actually know if it's working? How do you know if you can even trust the data you're getting back?
To figure that out, researchers use something called the true score model. Now, don't let the letters scare you. The idea is actually pretty simple. Think of it this way. The score someone gives you is a mix of their true feeling plus a little bit of noise or error. Maybe they were in a bad mood that day or they misread the question. A good scale is simply one that minimizes all that noise and gets you as close as humanly possible to that true feeling.
And we check for that error by looking at 3 main things. First is reliability. Is the scale consistent? If you took the same survey a week apart, would you give roughly the same answers? Second is validity. Does the scale actually measure what you think it's measuring? Is your customer satisfaction scale really measuring satisfaction? Or is it accidentally measuring something else, like how loyal someone is to the brand? And finally, there's generalizability. Can the answers you get from a small group of people be applied to the much larger population you actually care about?
So from the number of stars to the exact words they use, to whether or not they give you that neutral middle option, every single choice matters. The next time an app asks for your 5-star rating, you'll know there's this incredible amount of thought, science, and a whole lot of potential pitfalls hiding just beneath the surface of that simple question. Kind of makes you think twice about that score you're about to give, doesn't it?